Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Episode number 358 of We Are Podcast. This episode is a compilation of the evolutionary path to entrepreneurship, and we have some huge guests on this particular episode. Now, when you're thinking about creating a podcast, if you're making it to talk about your entrepreneurial creation, whether it is a business or a program or a book or a speaking gig, whatever it is that you have made, the path and how the podcast fits into that is really important. We have Joey Coleman talking about the evolution of business through customer experience, really powerful how you actually use that. Angela Henderson talks about breaking down money blocks. Cameron Harold, who has written multiple books in best-selling books in different fields, not different fields in the entrepreneurial space, talks about the entrepreneurial DNA, embarking on bipolar traits, ADD, narcissism. It's a really cool section here that is part of this episode. And we have Bree Seeley, who talks about empowering underrepresented entrepreneurs through nonprofit initiatives. So this is a very deep episode. I hope you enjoy it. This compilation is the power of collective wisdom from all the previous conversations that I've had. Episode 358. Enjoy the show.
You can't find your voice if you don't use it. This is We Are Podcast, formerly called Should I Start a Podcast? A podcast for podcasters who want a podcast that grows their business and brand. How many times can we say podcast in a sentence? Here's your host, Ronsley. He has interviewed more than 1,500 people, has been listened to over 5 million times in 133 countries. He has helped create over 1,100 podcasts for businesses, brands, and personalities. He's been doing this for more than a decade. Get ready to take notes. Enjoy the show.
What business looks like for you?
I spend all day, every day teaching companies how to keep their customers and keep their employees. The way I do that is I give speeches, I lead workshops, I facilitate training sessions, I write books. I look for ways to help educate folks because I think most businesses, most business owners want to create remarkable experiences for their customers. They want to create remarkable experiences for their employees, but they sometimes struggle with how to do that. So we share frameworks and methodologies and tips and tricks and case studies to help them achieve that. The bulk of my day is spent on the road, giving speeches, leading those workshops, that type of thing. And so my business started to pivot and evolve into a consultancy that was all around customer experience and customer retention. As that business grew and those efforts grew, I started speaking more, I started writing more, I started doing podcasts, and the design and kind of acquisition side of my business, the marketing side of the business, kind of went away.
Everyone keeps talking about overnight successes. Like I failed multiple times. I had like over $500,000 in debt and then paid that off. And it's all this journey that never gets spoken about. When you look back at 21 years, what are the stories that haven't gotten told yet that pops to your mind?
I've built a business around designing logos, and then it was a business around designing logos and ad campaigns, and then it was logos and ad campaigns and websites, and then I got tired of building websites, so it just went back to logos and ad campaigns, and then it started turning into speeches and consulting. And I think at the end of the day, what I know is probably true of your business, Ronsley, as well as most of the folks listening who've been in business for any appreciable amount of time, is that there often isn't a clear path or a clear progression when you're starting. It's easy to connect the dots. It's easy to see the threads of connection and connectivity on the back end. But lots of times when we're in it, we're just responding to what's in front of us. And some business leaders, gurus, experts will say that that is a mistake. I personally believe that that's called living. I think the reality is, as you experience new things, you get exposed to new ideas, you grow and evolve in your own thinking, your own values, your own beliefs, your own priorities. Your business should necessarily morph and evolve with you. And mine certainly has.
You're a business owner. When someone asks you the question, what business are you in? How do you respond to that?
I mean, yeah, it's really simple. I'm here to help more women get more wealth in their hands is what I'm doing. And I do that in the role of as a business consultant. So ultimately, I'm here to help women make 4 and 5 figure months and then on to 6 and 7 figure years without burning out in the process. And when I talk about wealth, Ronsley, it's not just about revenue wealth that is in people's banks or the next launch. I'm talking about holistic wealth. What is your mental health like? What is your physical wealth like? What is your relationship wealth like? Because I think so often business owners are really prepared to just look at the dollar value and they forget about all this other beautiful holistic wealth that is surrounding them.
When someone talks to me about entrepreneurship, I believe mothers are the original entrepreneurs because they need to be whatever they need to be to have this piece of value. And I think business owners are like that as well. And they got to be the graphics designer, the visionary, the implementer, the a salesperson, and everything in between. But there's so much value in the wealth we already have. Can we start to think of that differently as a starting point? What are the basic beliefs that we need to kind of like tweak a little bit to sort of get those results?
I mean, the number one thing is that we have to work hard to make money. And one of the primary things I see is money blocks that people have had from childhood and intergenerational. So you have to work hard for your money. Money doesn't grow on trees. If your parents filed bankruptcy, if you saw your parents working long hours, is one of the biggest things that I have to work with these women on is you can live a beautiful, rich life and not have to work your butt off, really.
Yeah.
And so those are some of the beliefs that I see that people need to kind of start breaking down. Then you've also got things like imposter syndrome. You've also got things around, oh goodness, there's so many things. The list could go on here, Ronsley, but ultimately money is a huge thing. I also think, again, if you think of society and in Western cultures in particular, is people don't cope well if they've got money or they might not know how to manage the money because they haven't been taught and then they lose the money either through gambling or drinking or drugs or whatever. And entrepreneurship is no different. So many of us are just learning as we go. We're making it up as we go, right? Everything, as Marie Folio talks about, is figure outable. There's no specific roadmap for any one of us. It has to be personalized to us. And I think that's the secondary thing that I see with the women that I work with is they want to download the exact blueprint from someone else. They want the exact roadmap. But the thing is there's so many variables that we need to consider. There's what is your business model? What is your personality? What is your human design? What does your family component look like? How much money do you have? And then we need to mold and create a tailored business plan and strategy that is going to help them grow.
When you look back at your entrepreneurial journey, what are the things that stand out?
One big one was we almost bankrupted 1-800 Got Junk when we were about $80 million in revenue. We were a big company. Our CFO was very quiet, very amiable, very analytical from Indonesia. And their culture is you never challenge the CEO, you never challenge the COO, right? So he would say things like, are you sure we're not growing too quickly? Or are you worried at all that we're spending too much? No, we got this. And Brian and I were very entrepreneurial in our growth. We took the company from 2 million to 80 million in 5 years. We were on our way to 106 million the next year. Like we were crushing it, right?
Yeah.
We're the number 2 company in all of Canada to work for. We'd landed 5, we were really running strong. So, but we didn't understand how to run $100 million or $200 million company very well, right? So we didn't listen to him. And he didn't have the courage to talk loud enough for us to listen to, right? So what I learned from this was if you're not willing to listen to your people, hire people you're willing to listen to, because you're supposed to be surrounded by people who have your best interests, who are driving towards the same goals. And then God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. Our job is to use them in that ratio. And the leader should always be the one to speak last.
So these learning curves are really interesting. I mean, all our listeners are business owners, and I want to get a little bit into the business and entrepreneurship side of things because it's so misunderstood with social media and all of us sharing highlight reel as opposed to all the other stuff that's happening, right? What are
Oh,
some of
yeah.
the things that piss you off when you see that?
Well, it doesn't so much piss me off as it makes me very uncomfortable for the 97% of people that are going to try to run their own business that have no business running their own business. So most people should be more entrepreneurial. Most people should run their lives more like a business and stay within their budget and look for opportunities and maybe have some side hustle freelance gigs. But most people should not be out there trying to build a brand and trying to build budgets and hire people and build teams and run production and operations and sales because they don't have the skills nor do they have the entrepreneurial DNA. I think most entrepreneurs are bipolar. Most entrepreneurs have attention deficit disorder. Most entrepreneurs are possibly even a little bit narcissistic. Those are typically negative traits in the school system, but those are the traits that make entrepreneurs successful. The ADD, right, attention deficit, is not a disorder. I have 17 of the 18 signs of attention deficit disorder. My ex-wife said if I was paying attention during the testing, it would have been 18 for 18. So the ADD allows me to see everything, right? I see what's happening with the customer, the market, the suppliers. I see what's happening with the model, with our trends. I see the little mistakes on the website. I notice the spaces between things. But if I was so focused, I'd miss all the other stuff in my business. So I think you need ADD to be an entrepreneur. That crazy high frenetic energy is why people will quit their jobs to come and work for us. It's why they'll invest. It's why they'll have us a guest on the podcast. It's why they'll write stories about us. It's why they'll ask us to speak. It's because they love that energy and the enthusiasm. The stress and depression is simply us depleting all of that and not having good habits in place to balance ourselves out. And yes, some people are bipolar or on the spectrum for bipolar, and they're normal humans. But when you're an entrepreneur, it's magnified because I'm now telling somebody to quit their job and come and work for me, and I'm not even sure how to meet payroll next week. I'm now borrowing a bunch of money from the bank that I hope I can pay back. I think I can pay back. I probably haven't even told my spouse I've signed personally for this line yet. Maybe I haven't paid myself a paycheck for 4 months and I'm paying all my employees. And then the third one is narcissism, right? Where you believe you're right. You're so sure you're right. That's because you're going to get told 67 times today that you're wrong. You need to be so sure and so driven and so focused that you're going to keep pushing. So unless you have those DNA traits and the skills, sales, marketing, operation, time management, people, project, etc., I don't think you should be running your own business at all.
Yeah. Yeah, I believe that the biggest jump anyone can make is from a solopreneur to become an entrepreneur, where you have to start dealing with people, where operations come into play and culture comes into play and all these other things come into play, which a lot of us are not trained to do at all.
Hey, it's Mick Hawes, host of The Toolshed. I love making my podcast, and that's primarily because Ronsley has helped me avoid a whole bunch of really basic mistakes that would have cost me a whole bunch of time, money, and energy. And Rons has compiled a list of these mistakes and how to avoid them, which is really a steal. You can get your copy where I downloaded mine at mistakes.wearepodcast.com. That is mistakes.wearepodcast.com. We Are Podcast. You can't find your voice if you don't use it.
Let's talk about this new pivot in the business. It's obviously exciting you because you can hear it in the way you're saying things. How is it structured and why is it structured like this? And what's the goal for the year?
Yeah, so I am rebranding my business and I'm actually getting rid of the 2 revenue streams that have been in my business since 2017, I think. And I'm not getting rid of them because there's anything wrong with them. In fact, they're actually really great revenue streams. They've made huge impacts and done great things in the world. I'm just taking my business in a different direction. And so with the advent of the nonprofit, I was like, okay, what impact do we want to make? Like, yes, it's for women entrepreneurs, but what are we actually doing with it? It's not just hosting an event. Like, what are we actually doing? And so what I'm doing is my one program, which is specifically for new entrepreneurs, is basically going to start being run by the nonprofit. And what we're doing is basically getting funding and creating endowment scholarships to be able to run at first, so 2024 will be the first year, 100 individuals through that program, under-resourced, underrepresented individuals who maybe can't afford to go through an entrepreneurial training program. To be able to go through this, it's 6 months. They get 3 coaches, they get community support and mentorship, they get 12 modules, they get like all sorts of stuff to help them go from whatever their idea is to stress testing their idea, making sure that it's, going to be viable in the marketplace, to launching their business, to then having support on the other side as well. I think about, there's a community in Tulsa that is severely under-resourced. They just got a grocery store, right? Like, I met a girl who grew up there and she told me about how her and her mom had to take the bus 45 minutes to go to Walgreens to get toilet paper in each direction. You think about, a single mom who is probably working at least 2, if not 3 jobs for 10, 12 bucks an hour, who has to take an hour and a half out of her week to go buy toilet paper. Like, it just breaks my heart. And there's so many more options available that I'm like, we need to be teaching these individuals what it's like to build businesses and giving them the tools and knowledge that they need and support to do this. Because if you think about a community like that, say 100 individuals from that community are going through this entrepreneurial program and launching businesses. If each of those businesses start bringing in even $5,000 a month, that's $500,000 a month in that community that was not there before.
What are you building from, and what are the changes that are happening?
Yeah, I think, what is interesting is we talk about niches a lot in the entrepreneur world, and what niche do you have, and what is the problem that you're solving and the solution that you bring. And I think the difficulty is that when you are different, that you've got different insights and different learnings, and you want to bring and pioneer maybe some innovative thinking and even maybe just a little disruptive thinking, then you've got to interpret it from what you have been doing. So what I've done with private clients behind the scene, worked with a lot of the little thing people would say is you're like the secret sauce behind a lot of great leaders. And that is kind of great until you want to market that out to the world. And then how does that bring a solution in a world that doesn't fit necessarily how you think? So I think for me, what has been key is interpreting what I do on the global space and then bringing that back to the everyday human and going, how can I help you make smarter decisions, more effective decisions, lead in your industry, and then get the actual results you want and take it to a next level?
What do you see if you had to look back at the things that made your creation sustainable with the business activity that you did?
You just really have to care about the product you're building. And so for me, I use it every day. I'm either doing breath work or in the physical space. This was never meant to be a business. I think building a business over a 3-year time horizon is almost impossible. If you said, hey, I have to start this now and be successful in 3 years, there's so much competition. If you say, hey, I'm doing this because it is play for me and I enjoy it, and what I create, I want people to use. Okay, it doesn't matter to me if it's successful in 3 years or 5 years, 7 years, or 10 years. This is the thing I want to be doing. And so on a Friday night, if I'm making a breath work or thinking about an ecstatic dance or looking at the 5th or 50th or 500th design of the New York studio, that's what I want to be doing. Yeah. And so there's one is like the work is play in a lot of ways because you're creating, and there's a lot of shit also, like nobody wants to be signing leases and reviewing 150-page lease documents over and over, or doing continued performance reviews or negotiating with vendors or doing, there's stuff that's not fun. And so that's been the overwhelming part is as we grow, when you start, it's like so fertile and it's just all ideas and like MVPs and you're seeing people's faces and it's so exciting. And as you grow, the problems really grow as well. And there's enough in there that I'm driven to do. And is it play? And then, can you experience it yourself? So for me, as I mentioned, I'm going tonight. If I get too stuck in the business, which happens if we're raising money, when we're in builds, when we're launching, it's quite intense. It's like, okay, I'm just going to go in the space. I'm going to meet someone new there. I'm going to talk to them. I'm going to do one of the classes and be like, wow, I can't, look around and maybe 2 or 3 people are crying. And it's like, I can't believe we're having that kind of impact. So it's a mix. It's super hard. It's super fun. Some days are great. Some days are not. I've heard this quote from Mark Andreessen that entrepreneurship is either euphoria or terror, but never in between. So it just, depends on the day. Like there was a day when I thought we were going to run out of money 6 months ago. And I was, oh my God, it's never going to work. We signed this lease in New York. I'm going to lose my house. It's just going to fail. And it was a nightmare. And I woke up sweating. And like, that's not true. And that's not what's going to happen. But it was, there's just these moments of euphoria and moments of fear.
How would you recommend today in 2023 business owners, founders get themselves out there more?
It's so funny because we just talked about giving advice. And so the advice I give for 1 out of 10 might be good, and for the other 9 is probably not effective. So I think for me is it's like, where are your customers? Who are your customers? And how can you find them? And so the first thing is, can you find 100 customers who love what you do? And can you ensure that what you're building is exactly what they want? And before I tried to get my message out there, I would ensure my message is right. And so an example of how we did that is, an ice bath in a backyard, going out around the neighborhood, telling people we were offering, free events, looking at who came back 10 times, who came back 20 times. Okay, there's 50 people who've been back 20 times. How do they describe this? Oh, I feel alive. Oh, I feel community and connection. Oh, I feel committed to doing this. I feel awe. We took all that language, and that is how we then describe our product. And so once you have a product that is working, core customer, a way they describe that language, you can then start to think about, how do we advertise at greater scale?
When we hit our pain line that we tend to do as entrepreneurs. And I think that is just such a beautiful start to this whole thing that we actually have going on, but no one really talks about how we can mess things up.
Yeah, I mean, what's been fascinating for me, having coached thousands of entrepreneurs at different levels, I've seen these natural, what I call kind of growth ceilings of revenue and team structure and complexity, right? And usually what happens when people get to a place where growth equals pain, right? They decide to do one of 3 things. It's either, they call them the 3 S's. They either decide to sell the business because the promise that they sold themselves on is not materializing, right? They grew their business, they make less profit, more pain, more challenges. They're not healthy, they're not sleeping well, etc. The other one is they sabotage their growth, meaning that they inadvertently make decisions to create ground cover for them to deal with problems to fail. It's a fascinating one. I mean, as simple as like not even replying to an email fast enough that you could, because you're not ready to grow, and you sabotage yourself by missing out on the opportunity because of not replying fast enough. And then the fourth one is to stall, to decide, I don't want to grow. And the unfortunate part about entrepreneurs that get to that place, your customers' demand of a better service or product grows year over year. Nobody's ever said like, oh, I'm happy and I don't want any change or improvements on my service. No, that's never going to be the case. And then the hardest one is typically your best people. If you're in a happy spot today and you don't want to grow, the best people on your team, they're not going to stay at a place where there's no opportunity for, expansion and growth, because most great people want to know that there's a future that's big enough for their dreams to fit inside of. And as a leader, that's our job to deliver that. So when people hit the pain line, they usually do one of those 3 things. And what I wanted to offer is a completely different approach, which is the buyback principle, to help people look at their calendar, get stuff off of their plate, and then fill it with things that light them up, that make them more money, so they can actually continue growing without creating a lot of pain in their life.
Thank you so much for listening. Listen to the back catalog of over 300 episodes by going to wearepodcast.com. If you're looking for something specific, let the We Are Podcast team point you in the right direction. Send us an email on podcast@wearepodcast.com. Also, if you know a business owner who has a podcast, ask them to listen. Share an episode with them. The conversations here are going to save them lots of trial, error, time, and money. Until next week, much love.